aircraft systems for search and rescue, fire, disaster situations for 11, 12 years, give or take a week. And this dude's out there all the time, in the field and working. And I think you're going to learn a lot from his program here. Big hand for Gene Robinson.
Okay, I get the carb crash session right after lunch, so I'll try to keep you guys awake. We're gonna be talking about a lot of things having to do with public service, and we're gonna be talking about business, and we're gonna be talking about disasters. We're not gonna be talking about business disasters, but ways that you, as an operator or a business owner, can potentially see the business that can be derived from public service. And I got to tell you, I get asked this question all the time, and Patrick talks about me being out there for years, but people ask me, Gene, how long have you been flying these things? Not that long. Okay, that's me in 1960, so I just dated myself. But and then the second question is, did Gene pop out to the party shop this morning and get a new costume? No, I didn't. This is the uniform of my fire department. I have been a member of my fire department for years, but almost everybody that knows me has seen me in khaki VDUs, nondescript, kind of low-key guy, This is an evolution. My fire chief says you represent our fire department as the unmanned aircraft chief pilot. Think about that. It's a fire department. It's a public service agency. We have gone from, I was out in the periphery, and when I could help them out, I would. I would take my airplane out, and I would fly it, and I would do my imagery. I'd give it to them, and it was good, useful information. They recognized it. But they weren't ready to take on the role of flying unmanned aircraft. So this year, I get to wear my blues, and I get to represent my fire department. That, my friends, is a significant step. You'll find more and more public service agencies out there that are willing to embrace drone technology. And you, as a business owner, an operator, a potential entrepreneur, should consider the public service sector. Why? They're going to be first adopters. They're going to like the stuff that you do. They are procedure driven. They're used to being under regulations. Where are we at now? We are under regulations that we have to abide by. They're used to it. They're used to looking at regulations, federal, state, whatever, and following procedures. That's the kind of people that we want in the industry, right? We want the folks that'll be out there that are flying safe, but also doing public service. So I'm going to tell you a little tale about an event that occurred this time last year on Memorial Day. It was a flood that took place in my hometown, and it produced a lot of amazing results. It was a disaster of just a magnitude that we haven't seen ever. They call it a millennial flood. This thing was, let me give you a little bit of background. It's a little sleepy tourist town. Blanco River runs through it. You can walk across the Blanco River, limestone. Got a few deep pools that you can kind of wade in, but nothing more than that. In a 24-hour period, we've got 20 inches of rain. Can you say flash flood? With that, we had 230,000 cubic feet per second flowing down the Blanco River at 50 miles an hour. Our fire department gets about 300 calls a year. That's typically what we answer to. And in a 10-hour period, we ended up, that was an 8-hour period, we ended up getting over 100 calls for help. To say we were maxed out was an understatement. State resources started coming in. Anybody who could help started coming in. The interesting thing about this is it was a microcosm of a disaster that was very easily contained. But what we saw was the infrastructure was totally destroyed. We had no cell phones, we had no electricity, we had no way to communicate with the outside world. We were cut off because the flood had cut off many of the ways in and out of Wimberley. It's pretty scary stuff. The state responded with their assets very quickly, and we were very thankful to them. They brought in the National Guard. We had the Black Hawks come in. They were plucking people off of rooftops, just like you saw in Katrina. Any of the other disasters that you saw, we were in the same position. The calls were coming in. And we had to respond, and we, as the incident command for the situation, had to coordinate all those resources. Yeah, the Texas Task Force 1 is the traveling task force. We responded to Hurricane Katrina. Any of the major disasters that you heard in the past, Texas Task Force 1 responds to. They issued their own temporary flight restriction through the FAA, and that was for 2 days. They handled the extractions when the weather was really bad and the flood was at its highest. By Sunday, the weather started clearing off and we started bringing out the unmanned assets. About the time that the TFR expired from the FAA. Okay, so you can guess what happened next, right? Everybody and their brother that had a drone wanted to come out and fly the disaster to show their capabilities, right? Everybody does it. And I was flying our aircraft for the Wimberley Fire Department to do infrastructure assessment, damage assessment, that sort of thing, and was running around all over the place trying to keep up with the chief's request. Now, the Wimberley Fire Department has had a COA. Everybody's heard about the COA, Certificate of Authorization. And we've had one for a couple of years. Actually, our county has had one since 2007. I wrote the first COA that was accepted by the FAA back in 2007 for a civilian entity. So we were flying under our COA, and I've got to give the FAA their props. We got sporadic communications back via text. I put in my eCOA request to the FAA via text. Said, hey guys, we're in trouble down here. We need to fly in a bigger area. They approved it in 45 minutes, which is just lightning speed for our government. I'm sure you can understand that. So we ended up with a TFR, back up one more. We went out to the bridge that crosses the Blanco River, and I was with the incident commander at the time. And it looked like mosquitoes from all the unmanned aircraft flying. And he looked up there and he says, we've got to get control of this. He says, you're my pilot, do something now. I go, oi. Okay, so from there, we got our own TFR. We requested that through the FAA. They not only gave us, we asked for 5 miles, they gave us 13 miles. They went above and beyond. They started working with Air Traffic Control at Houston Center, and we started getting our stuff done very quickly. It was a good effort for the FAA. One of the sad things about the Wimberley floods is there was a family of 11 in a house, and that house got swept down the river. And it crashed into the only bridge over the Blanco River that night. There was one survivor out of that. The rest of those people perished in the flood. And my brothers in the fire department that were doing the swift water portion of that will take the memory of that house floating down the river with those people screaming for help for the rest of their lives. That was a tragedy. And they were a very influential family. They had quite a few contacts. And their family out of Corpus Christi, the McComb family, mustered a search force. The first day we had 400 people show up and 14 Robinson helicopters in an area the size of 2.5 miles. So you can imagine between all the drones, 14 Robinson helicopters, 2 Black Hawks, 2 Jet Rangers from the state, we had congested airspace. And again, someone says, we have to manage this, and my chief says, there's my pilot, let's make him air boss. Oh, yay. And interestingly enough, I had gotten deployed to the county above our county because they had gotten hit just as hard. And coordination process is what got us in trouble, because we were expecting Texas Task Force to be there for longer. They moved out, had to move back, and we were flying everything from a fixed-wing aircraft to a DJI Inspire. So again, here you go, operators, this is something to think about. Right tool, right job. While we were in that situation, sometimes the Inspire was the best to go in there and do a quick look. Other times, the fixed wing that we used had to cover a large area. And it worked. Right tool, right job. Oh yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to point out with this picture, there on the left, are 2 members of the Austin Fire Department. They assisted as well. And they have, with my help, stood up what they call the Robotic Emergency Deployment Team, the RED team. And they are starting their own program, which from this disaster sprang many benefits, of which Austin, which is in Travis County, got their COA, and they got the 7 surrounding counties as well. And if you know anything about how COAs or 333s work and your air crew requirements, you have to have a visual observer, you have to have a PIC, you have to have sufficient operators. And they typically keep you in line of sight, and only during daylight operations. Out of this, we got nighttime operations, and we could daisy chain visual observers. So if you know what that means, rather than being able to communicate with your visual observer, we could send them out a half mile and talk with them on radio, and we could send another person a half mile past him. That's significant. Based on what we are allowed today, that was, or what we were allowed back then, that was significant. This is the kind of destruction that we saw. Massive infrastructure damage, roads, electricity, telephone lines. It was all there. We imaged a big chunk of it. This particular image is one of the Blanco River bridges that was completely destroyed, and it was taken by a DJI Inspire. So there you go, right tool, right job. This is one of the first images that we collected, and I don't mean to disparage any of the manned helicopter pilots that are out there, but this is one that they missed. We were flying the Blanco River, and if you'll notice, let's see if I can find a laser on this guy. I'll point. Right there, and in the inset, you'll see that glimpse of a silver kind of a deal. That is a bumper on a car. It's nose down in the water. And they flew right over it and missed that one. But again, they're helicopter guys, and they're flying along pretty fast, and that sort of thing is not something that's going to jump out at you. But again, there is the example of how an unmanned aircraft in a still image can help in a certain situation. Now, that particular vehicle was subsequently cleared, and there was no one in it, thank goodness. The first ring that you see there is around Wimberley. That was the 2-mile TFR that we got. The second ring is the 13-mile TFR, and that's what I got to be responsible for 11 days. As a point of contact, that means that every single person that wants to enter into that airspace, because you have a NOTAM up, right, notice the airman's up, they call your number. So every single aircraft that came in there, whether it was 5 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning for the air ambulance, would call me up and say, hey, can I come to your airspace? Boy, I didn't sleep much because there was a lot of traffic in and out of there. What a lot of people don't realize in a search and rescue situation, even infrastructure damage, all we're doing is mapping. Really, it just comes down to that. You're mapping an area, and in this particular case, we wanted to see and get the best resolution that we could up to incident command so they can react to it. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to react. They're trying to remediate the disaster. Okay, now, as business owners, operators, service providers, are you thinking about where you could fit in to this scenario, where you could lend your expertise? I mean, we're talking data here. We're talking about massive chunks of data. Wimberley Fire Department does not have the capability to deal with that kind of data. Something to think about. We took a fixed-wing aircraft out, and this is the essentially the Wimberley Valley flood zone. That is 7 miles of river that was imaged in just under 5 hours. Now, it took a very high-powered computer running some software that's significantly more expensive than Pix4D, about 28 hours to run that. However, when we were done with that, and this is a geek coming out at me, we got 1.7 centimeters resolution. And what was really surprising about that is it was done with a 10 megapixel camera. So there's a kind of an example that you can take back with you, that you don't necessarily need 182 megapixels to get good resolution. Here we go. I've got ahead of myself, but they changed the VO rules for us. This is an excerpt from that same orthomosaic that you saw. And this is the kind of detail that we were getting at the time. This was just after the flood. You can see where the river bottom has basically been scrubbed clean for a wide area outside. Did we have any infractions? No, we didn't have one. There were a couple of hotshot pilots out there that felt like they didn't have to check in. We had drone operators that tried to come in and say, oh, we're authorized. We've got authorization. Well, who'd you get authorization from? Oh, we've got our certificate. Really? Who'd you get it from? Well, we went to a certification program. Did you check in with incident command? What's that? So, again, this is one of the things that I stress and that I've talked about for years. I think it's great that operators and people that are getting into the technology want to help. They want to provide a service because it is a valuable service. And we embrace it, we love it, right? It's all about what sort of data we can collect. But you can't just go to a disaster and say, I are a pilot, here I am. You got to know the infrastructure behind the search. It's called National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. And you can go to the FEMA website, you can actually take courses that are free, and you learn about it. And you can then say, I'm NIM certified. That's the first step that you take when you approach your public service agency, whether it's your sheriff's department, your municipality, your fire department. You can say, hey, I've already gotten up to speed on NIMS, and you know what? They'll go, wow, okay, that's good. You looked that far into it. So now you can speak with me. Very important that you be able to talk on the same level as they do. Because they're going to ask you questions that as the operator, you're going to have to be able to answer. How far, how high, how close. All those things need to be explained to a firefighter who's not a very good pilot, but he's a good firefighter. So you have to explain it in such a way that they understand. They don't want the geek. It's a spare me the picks and shovels, show me the hole kind of situation. One of the things that, and I've got to say this, for those that saw, you guys that saw me this morning in the red shirt, and I had to dash back to the hotel and get changed, is communications. And this whole deal that we went through with the disaster, most of the shortcomings that we ran into were due to communications either wrong or lack thereof. Okay, so Patrick told me yesterday, oh, you're on Thursday. And I believed him. So that made me have to go back to the room and get changed. So almost everything that we ran into as far as recommendations that we made revolved around communications and being able to talk with not only incident command, but with the other pilots in the air and with other pilots operating the unmanned assets. We had 4 approved teams out there. We got the helicopters whittled down to 4 helicopters because they were flying dogs over here and people over there, and it was just they were basically a taxi service. So it was very important for us to be able to coordinate inbound, outbound, who was operating where, and don't fly down the river because there's a drone at your altitude. I wanted to do my best to keep the aluminum ring to a minimum. And I'm very happy to say that we didn't have any incidences or near misses, or near hits, if you will, of aircraft and drone, which I'm very pleased with that. Okay, that's it. Got to be assigned. Got to be able to communicate. That was the big deal behind the whole thing. We had, at the end of the day, aside from the 14 Robinson helicopters, we had 1,000 civilian searchers that were wanting to be deployed to help find the missing members of that family. There were 2 command posts set up, one for the family and one for the official state and local public service agencies. There was very little communication between the 2. And let me tell you, there was plenty of times that we got crossways with each other. And as the controlling entity, supposedly the controlling public service entity, it was difficult for us to have to tell searchers, no, you can't go in that area because of whatever reason. It could be a dog team was in there. It could be that there was a forensics team in there. And there were many people that didn't understand that because they're not used to the National Incident Management System and what it takes to run a search. So we had to educate those people as we went. And that's a difficult position to be in because you're trying to remediate the situation as quickly as you possibly can. You want to get your townspeople back up to where they were as quickly as possible, or at least to some semblance of where they were before, because it was a disaster of epic proportions for us. Handheld transceivers is a must. We found out that the handheld aviation radios, I could see a helicopter and couldn't talk to it because I was on the ground. That was a terribly helpless feeling, is to, be calling out, 44 Tango and they don't hear you because you've got a drone over here that's flying. So you end up having to tell the drone to get down. So again, communications, big deal. Yeah, freelancing, that was a really bad thing with the freelancers out there. And again, the code process, even though it is onerous right now, is still very important because it gives everyone a set of procedures to operate off of. You have to do certain things before you can go out there and fly in the airspace. or fly that disaster or fly whatever. We obviously applaud and welcome the 333 exemption process. We have ours. And that's interesting that you would have to choose between the two, which we didn't. We got both. Go for a COA, go for a 333. And actually a COA is more restrictive than a 333 is. So why would you go for it? Well, typically you have to file the NOTAM, the Notice to Airmen. They ask for 48 to 72 hours in advance. Well, people don't give us a real heads up when they're going to go missing. So we have to kind of respond quickly. Now, they've also, as everyone knows, the blanket COA for the United States has now been lifted to 400 feet. So as long as you're in Class G airspace, you're pretty much good to go. And I would hazard a guess that a lot of the stuff that went on in these disasters, the Boer disasters, the Mississippi disasters on Christmas Eve where the tornadoes came through, contributed to the easing of that particular blanket COA. There's no question in my mind, because I know personally that the FAA was hammered with requests by people trying to go out there and help their communities. And you just can't deny people who are out there trying to help their communities as much as they can in these disaster situations. So I'm pretty sure that that had a lot to do with it. The one thing that I got out of this as an operator, single point failures. Anytime you have a single point failure in your system, you're one step away from your own little disaster. You either are going to lose an aircraft, or you're going to lose your data, or you're going to hurt someone. So think about, as operators, what are the single point failures that could occur? It could be a radio, it could be a modem for your flight control system. If you don't have backup for it, you could be in trouble. And the way we always put it, in the field, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So if you don't have a backup, one break, you're down, out, go home. And there were many folks out there that said that they had wonderful capabilities and could do wonderful things, and they were authorized by us to work in the area, and it was one and done many times, because operating in the field and operating in conditions that are less than optimum, something's going to break. Murphy's going to be there. And you need to be able to respond to Murphy when he pops up his ugly head, because it will happen, and it'll happen at the most inopportune time. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Now, I wanted to challenge you guys to think about how you can insert yourself in that situation, not only from a business standpoint, because public service agencies are now starting to swing back the other way, hence the blue uniform. The sales cycle is typically kind of long, and you have to be prepared for that, because they have budgetary constraints that they have to deal with. So whatever they want for 2017 better be in the budget in 2016. So you have to prompt them. You have to try to get that pipeline primed as quickly as possible to get that done. And it may take some time. But again, you have a captive audience. Once they accept the program that you offer or the piece of equipment that you offer, they commit to it. And after that, it's typically, if you provide what you say you're going to provide, is a recurring revenue stream, which that's what we all want, right? We want the check in the mailbox every month, you know. And we want to be able to sell them systems. We want to be able to do their data processing. We want to be able to assist them in being better public servants to us, right? It's your tax dollars, it's my tax dollars. So there is a challenge for you folks out there as operators and business persons, is figure out how you can use the technology that you have available to you, and how you may want to use future technology for public service. And just as a sidebar, people ask, well, how much water is 230,000 cubic feet per second? The Blanco River is typically at flood stage at 12 feet. And the worst flood that we had recorded at the time was 22 feet. The night that we had that rain, the river crested at 58 feet. A lot of water. So there's the kind of magnitude that you say, they call it a millennial flood because they have nothing to compare it to. So there is a kind of disaster that can cause businesses to spring from. I hate to use the old term, never let a good disaster go unwasted, but it happens. It was tragic, and what we need to do as owners and operators is try to help prevent it. And I thank you for your attention, and I hope it was informative.